I currently work at a company called Optimum Television. I've been there for over a year now. I am the producer on the programme Call the Cops, which is a Channel 4 series, 9 p.m, which we filmed last year, and it follows the response officers. And it was a documentary talking about the response to how police are coping with all the police cuts. Because it's a police documentary, it just takes a very, very long time to put together, because of so many different variables, including consent for those who we filmed, and editing the stories and all the legals. And we've only just finished the series last week, so I'm doing all the sort of tidy up at the moment. So that's currently what I'm doing, and I'm also working part-time in development as well at Optimum, so developing all sorts of ideas.
Yeah. And so how long have you been working in TV, in the kind of industry?
So I've been working in TV probably over 10 years now. I started working in television when I did my study year abroad. When I was at UEA, I studied American Studies, and that's kind of opened up my opportunities because I had the option to do a study year abroad. So I put Canada actually on the list because I wanted to get to know my granddad who lived in Canada. So that was the top of my list to go to the University of Western Ontario. But I didn't realise that they had such a good sort of student television network, which actually broadcast to the whole of Ontario. So I kind of had always wanted to be some sort of journalist or something media related, but I wasn't really sure what path to take. But when I went to that university, I started working for the student TV network and created my own documentaries called The Underground Report. Very British. And it was, I mean, I wasn't doing over exciting things. I was sort of just, talking about naughty landlords, or quite kind of self-contained student stories, which I was interested in at the time. That sort of launched me into TV. And then when I got back to UEA, I did my final year at UEA, obviously, and when I graduated, I went on to do a master's in broadcast journalism because I got a real buzz for news then. And in my final year at UEA, I also started working for the local radio companies such as Radio Norwich and BBC Radio Norfolk, just doing work experience when I could. And that helped me to get my master's as well.
So do you think that getting a master's in like a more specific role with like a straight path to TV work was useful? Like, do you think that was necessary after like your experience, that you felt you needed like a more formal qualification as well?
That's a really, really good question, because I obviously meet so many people who've come from all different walks of life and had a different path in, and it's kind of a sort of idea in television that it's who you know, and I don't think it's necessarily who you know, because I didn't know anyone who worked in TV when I started working in TV. So I sort of started from the bottom and worked my way up. But I think firstly, having an undergraduate degree in for anything really, but I guess American Studies, you have the research, and I'm very interested in history, so I tend to sort of do lots of documentaries where it's either talking about a public institution where I want to find out more, or I don't know, I guess when you're a documentary maker, you're quite naturally nosy, so it's having those things in you anyway. Yeah, I think gaining all the experience when I was at UEA, doing as much work experience as possible, helped me a lot. The masters helped me in the sense that, this is quite silly really, I ran out of money living in London, so it helped me in the sense that I needed to get a job, and my the head of the master's course was like, why don't you look into getting a runner job? And I had no idea what a runner was in telly. I remember turning up for my interview at Princess Productions at the time, which doesn't exist anymore. It's owned by Shine TV. I turned up like wearing like really smart like dress and stuff, which I've never ever worn a dress since in TV. And then that day I was sort of making coffees for people and taking the bins out. So I guess it was a combination of I think it is. I think the masters definitely has helped me in what I do in terms of the legal side, and I'm quite gritty documentary maker. But I think in terms of other TV, I don't think a masters is necessary. And I know most people who are working in television haven't got a masters in broadcast journalism.
Yeah. So is it fair to say that kind of your passion and your storytelling came from like your undergrad and just general life, and the master's very much towards the more like grittier like legal side and like the actual realities of living, just helped with that kind of side of the career?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think having the nose to want to tell a story, which helped because I was already doing a humanities degree, but I think that's fair to say of any degree really. I know a lot of very useful undergraduate degrees in like zoology or environmental science, anything really where you've got that particular niche that you're interested in something. You know, when you're at university, you're obviously there for a reason, to learn and study something more, so you've already got that naturally in you. And then being in an environment where you're sort of encouraged to find out who you are as well. I think it's that age, isn't it, when you're sort of open to lots of new ideas and understanding where you want to take your career. And then I guess the masters was sort of the icing on top, but definitely helped me with understanding sort of legal media law, and the masters was very hard, so I haven't actually done anything as hard as my masters, so that I think that kind of sets you up in a good way as well, that you're kind of prepared for the very worst and it's not that bad.
So if you walk us through when you graduated from your masters, kind of what were your feelings towards finding your first job, and what was the story from there to having employment?
Okay, well, I've been quite lucky in a way, and I know I've been lucky and I haven't had to kind of look too far or look too much for TV work. I've sort of kind of stuck with the people that I know, and I think that's one thing to be said as well. But when I joined Princess Productions, so Princess Productions back in the day was a office at the top of the White Ease building in London. It was quite fancy, like an old sort of shopping mall, and then they owned the whole of the top floor. So they were making such amazing programs. They used to make The Right Stuff, which is why I originally wanted to join them, because I saw myself making those sorts of programs, like magazine shows, which had the news element. And then they made cookery shows, and they made Something for the Weekend, which is now Sunday Brunch, I think. And then they used to make T4, so that really cool program, which hasn't existed for a really long time now. So it might be before everyone's time now. That's showing my age. So I fell into this pool of runners where you don't know what you're doing day to day. There's like a rota, and there's 10 of you, and sometimes you're allocated working on T4 or helping the prop team or doing the research for The Right Stuff. So every day I didn't know what I was walking into at all. I actually fell into the hands of Ashley Banjo, Secret Dance Crew. So you know Ashley Banjo, the singer, he was doing his own documentary where he would teach kind of different members of kind of society. So whether it's like a group of builders or something, to do like surprise dances at their wedding or something. It was a really exciting program. And my producer director, so sort of my boss on that, was called Rita Daniels, and she took me under her wings, and she's now one of the commissioners at Channel 4, but she took me with her when she left that. She took me with her onto the second series of 24 Hours in A&E. So that's when I left Princess Productions, and that's when I went into the world of hospital documentaries. So I really just, I guess when you start at the beginning of TV, you don't really know. I mean, some people have a clear path of where they want to take it, but I was really open, and I just really love meeting people and learning people's stories that I didn't really know exactly what genre I wanted to go into, but I sort of met Rita and found actually that my way of making television was actually working for a team that I really enjoy working with, because it's really hard work. So finding the right team, I think, is equally as important.
Yeah. I know from being friends with graduates that have kind of gone into the industry, they often end up being runners for like a long time. That's a common story. Do you think there's anything that you did to help, or like when you went from being a runner at Princess Productions to then you said getting taken under someone's wing, and that was how you ended up moving up as someone in that state of just seeming like endless runner jobs? Do you have to wait for someone to kind of give you that opportunity, or are there certain things to be proactive, or is it just a case of being open to anything?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the latter two. Being open to everything, really. When you're a runner, you are given lots of opportunities to meet certain people or go on different shoots. And although it's quite tiring and feels a bit thankless sometimes, but I think the more experience you get as a runner, the more likely you are to meet the right person who might, when they're on the new project, because it's a world of freelancers, so people always move, which is really handy because they'll think, oh, I really got on well with that runner, they're really proactive, they're really good at what they did, really calm, really friendly. Then you're likely to be the first person that they'll make contact with. So it is sort of being very proactive. I think the runner journey, I don't know, it's a funny one, really. I was a runner for 6 months, but some people are runners for a lot longer, and I don't think it's necessarily that I did anything different to what other people are doing. Ben, that's the postman. 1 second, sorry. Okay, my partner's got it. Sorry, we can just delete that bit.
Yeah, yeah, well, I'll edit that.
Sorry. Okay. What was I saying? What was the question again?
So it's about kind of getting taken under someone's wing, going from like being a runner to the next step.
Yeah, I guess also being a runner, it depends what company you're in. So some companies have a sort of runner training scheme where they see you being a runner for a year or two, and then they'll naturally progress you on to a junior researcher. So I think when you first start off as a runner, I think, no one wants to be a runner forever, and that is something that everyone understands. But I think it's also sort of understanding that it takes time, and you can only really jump up when that position is available. They can't just create a researcher position for you just because you don't want to be a runner anymore. So I think I sort of just fell into the hands of, I'd worked with someone who I got on really well with, and she needed a researcher, so that's how I got that job. But I would have happily stayed on as a runner for another year or so. So it is kind of a combination of luck, working hard, being proactive, meeting the right people, but also holding your nerve. And just because you've been a runner a little bit longer than you anticipated, that doesn't matter. Ultimately, TV is a long career if you stick at it. And actually, I really miss being a runner, and I wish that I had sort of slowed down a bit.
So would you say what role would you say you kind of are in your career? Because is the term that you'd use producer? Is that what you've worked as?
Yeah, I mean, the television roles have sort of evolved since I've worked in TV. So it's always a bit confusing, and it's whenever I try to explain to my family or friends who don't work in telly like what I do, it's quite hard to break it down, because I know the term producer is used in other companies as well, non-television companies. So it's quite a broad term. But I guess I've recently been made a senior producer, but that just means that I've been a producer for a little bit longer than, that I've just been sort of bumped up a little bit. So the role is a producer, or maybe it's more straightforward if I sort of talk about the different routes and then tell you what I do.
Yeah, that's
Easier.
yeah.
So obviously, most people will start off as a runner unless you've gone through a sort of channel scheme, such as Channel 4 has its researcher trainee schemes. And then after that, you tend to either there's two different paths. So there's the editorial path, where you'll become a researcher, or there's the production path, where you become a production secretary. The production path is the money side and the organizing side. The editorial side is also the organizing side, but the storytelling and the filming side. But they all go hand in hand and they're equally as important. So I took the researcher route, and then I went to assistant producer. When I was an assistant producer, I started to film a lot as well. So I think I'm one of the last sort of people who don't actively film. I didn't enjoy using the camera as much. I felt like my natural talents were more, casting people, getting to know people, storytelling. But visually, I felt like I found it quite stressful using the camera. So I sort of didn't pursue that side. So if you were to keep the camera operator side, you would probably become a shooting assistant producer. And then after that, that's where you sort of decide, do you want to be a kind of standalone producer, which is what I am, or do you want to be a producer director, where you are more the director more than anything? So that's when you are the one holding the camera and calling all the shots of what's filmed, but usually with a producer sort of supporting you. So my role as a producer changes daily. I am, to talk about a producer on a police documentary, I'm the main point of contact for the police force. So we work with Devon and Cornwall, so I'm frequently on the phone to the heads of communication there, the sergeants, the police, and then I'm also the main point of contact to the criminals. Quite like the criminals, or anyone else who the police came in contact with who we filmed. And then actually the producer, it depends how hands-on your director is, but I've also been doing all the interviews. So I will sit down with the police officers or the people that the contributors, and I'll sit down and do the master interviews with the cameraman next to me. So essentially the role of the producer is organising, casting, setting up the shoots, kind of putting out fires, problem solving, and sort of after it's all been filmed, helping the edit, tie everything together, making sure that everyone who's on screen is consenting, talking them through their contribution, making sure that the channel lawyers are happy with everything, and then calling everyone before it goes on television. But there's so many things with a police documentary as well, such as understanding everyone's mental well-being as well, and making sure that those who are going on television are sort of strong enough to appear on television, because they're quite vulnerable, some people. So there's so many different hats that a producer wears. But that's my sort of role is, I guess I just wear many hats, but I don't wear the camera hat. So I guess that's the only difference.
Yeah. So you've worked on like a lot of different projects. Obviously the police one now, you've alluded to doing lots in like hospital, like on that topic, as well as like the Ashley Banjo thing at the start of your career.
Yeah.
Do you find it difficult adjusting to each new almost like topic or each new theme, especially with a role that encompasses so much? Is it difficult transitioning to a new project in terms of what your responsibilities are?
Yeah, I mean, it's so immersive, and for instance, I think the sort of biggest transitional year I remember was when I used to make a documentary for Channel 5 called Circus Kids, where I followed the travelling circuses across Britain for about a year. And then after that, I went straight on to Surgeons at the Edge of Life, where we filmed surgeons doing brain surgery and heart surgery and all sorts of, very big surgeries. And I had sort of only had like a week in between, and that was quite weird. And you'll sometimes be walking through a hospital corridor and then being like, oh yeah, last week I was in the circus. So it is quite a quick world that you need to be very adaptable. That's one of the key things, of being adaptable. But you soon learn how to sort of put what you filmed previously to aside and focus on all the new people that you're meeting. It's like an ongoing education, TV. You are never bored and you're meeting so many new people. But I think it is good to have at least a week break in between, so that you can start mentally putting yourself in that new world that you're going to enter. Currently, I'm sort of finished Call the Cops, and I'm moving on to a murder documentary using archive. And the types of people that I'm talking to now, are not the cops, and it's a completely different world again, and it's a murder from 20 years ago. So I sort of, how I did, I naturally sort of start winding down what I'd been making previously, and I start to immerse myself in the new world. So at some point you'll be sort of working alongside both, if there's a new team that want to get your mind sort of engaged in your new project, and then eventually you can sort of slow down the other project and ramp up the new one. And you do just immerse yourself, and it's the good thing about TV, it's so interesting that it's not a difficult thing to throw yourself into, because it's so interesting.
I think so many jobs in the TV industry and in creative industries in general describe a key aspect of what they do is finding stories. So they kind of have to search for stories to tell. I don't think I've seen an example of a job that requires that more than your one. And so I was wondering what that process actually entails, when you're trying to, like, I guess it would be casting people, or just trying to find a narrative and stories within the world. What skills are useful, and what's your process for that?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a good question at the point that I'm working at the moment, because of coronavirus, I've dipped into the development world. So that's a world that I've done a little bit, because I used to work on the One Show, but not as much as the rest of my career. I've always started on documentaries which the idea already existed, and we sort of knew what we wanted to tell. But working in development, that's where all the stories are generated to create a series. And I'll talk about that quickly, and then I'll go on to how I do my own story finding in the documentaries. But development is interesting because your bosses of your company will have a good relationship with the channel commissioners, and every channel has an idea of what they're looking for. So usually they'll send a brief of what they're looking for, and the development team will be, you have to be so on top of all the current affairs and all the news, and reading all the newspapers and magazines. And some people might have their own access into a different world that they've grown up in. Like maybe there's someone who grew up as someone who was adopted or something and wants to tell something in their world. So everyone's got their own story to tell as well. So all these ideas are coming together, and they will, be pitched to the executives, who will then pitch it to the channel. And often channels will only want a sort of paid development gig, so have a go at making it, but we might not sign it off, or it'll be straight away into a series. So I've made development sound really easy. It's actually quite hard, but that's in a nutshell how it works. And when I first started in TV, I used to write down lots of ideas. I haven't had until recently the right headspace to do that, because I find myself so immersive in everything I'm making, I can't think of anything else outside of it. But I think it is really important for anyone, even if it's just something that comes to mind, just even a subject or something, just jot it down and just keep it with you. And then obviously, as my job as the producer, I'm always finding someone's story, and there's different ways that we do that. When I'm casting people, so when we were casting, say, I'll go back to the circus example, because it's quite straightforward. When I was casting the circus families, I would call them up and have Skype chats with them and meet them in person and find out exactly what their story is. And often when you just sit and listen and ask the questions that will naturally come to to mind anyway, then usually the story is there right in front of you. When you ask someone what their story is, they're like, oh, I haven't got a story. But when you sit down and ask them all questions, which we all have, then everyone has a story to tell. I don't believe that no one has a story. Everyone has a story. It's just finding it through getting to know people, and trust is so key as well. If someone trusts you, then they're going to open up more and tell you something exciting, which you can, make into a really powerful story.
So now to speak a bit about kind of employment for students. You said a bit about what you did whilst at university with the student TV in Canada and helping out some local radios. What are some of the things that you would recommend any student who's currently studying to try and get as much experience doing before applying to the sort of jobs in TV?
Yeah, I think there's something that I've really learned recently, which I've been bad at my whole TV career, is actually watching telly. I think the world that we're in, we're TV makers, and our homework is right in front of us. It's the people that we're meeting, and it's the TV that we're watching. So I think for someone who is keen to get into the TV world, I think it's watching so many different types of TV and understanding what they're interested in. My main thing is watching documentaries, and that's why I make documentaries, because that's what I care about. And TV is such a graft sometimes that you want to make sure that you're working in the right area of telly, because it's long hours, so you want to make sure it's rewarding. So I think watching TV is a big thing, which sounds really silly, but it's so that when you do get your job, you can talk about, oh, so do you mean you want it to be like this show? Or, oh, I saw this and I thought it was really good, so should we use this in this show? So you can use all these amazing programs as references. So I think that's something, if you've got the time, I would sort of write down sort of the top 20 documentaries or whatever area you want to go into, and just sit and watch them and make notes. I think also trying to get work experience. I know it's not as easy to get work experience now. I think it's changed slightly. I'm not entirely sure, but if you can even, I think is it called shadowing people now? Can you shadow people? I think I think that's it. I think it's having a look in your sort of where you live to see, even if it's radio. Radio is still storytelling, and I started in radio when I was doing work experience, and I think if you can tell a story with audio instead of visual, then that's half the battle, really. Visual is a bonus. So I think, or even writing stories, I think if you can just get into the knack of interviewing people, and doing your own interviews and submitting ideas to newspapers or online magazines, I think getting the storytelling experience is so important, and trying to shadow different people so you understand kind of what their job is, or maybe just asking if you can pick up the phone and talk to them and understand what they do. And then there's so many trainee schemes now. I think Channel 4 and ITV and BBC all have them, and there are lots of runner jobs. And I think if you're proactive and you just keep an eye on the runner jobs, then you will definitely get a runner job. There's different sites such as the Talent Manager, which advertises runner jobs. There's a Facebook page, lots of Facebook pages actually. Just keeping an eye on all sort of possibilities out there. There's definitely lots of TV work out there. It's a big industry. So I think it's just staying positive, trying to think out of the box as well. And I think if there's any local events as well, I think there's a few Royal Television Society groups in local areas. So that's a good way to meet people as well. I think it's just being proactive mainly.
And obviously, in such like a freelance industry, have you felt, and in your experience, has there been a need to still constantly be looking for the next work, or have you kind of felt there's a natural progression of once you've finished one project, the next one's already at your feet?
I mean, it's so hard. I mean, I have been lucky, and I tend to work for the same companies, Dragonfly, Optimum, The Garden, Drummer TV are sort of the main companies that I tend to work for, and I tend to work for the same people that I've got to know over the years. Um, it's You get used to being a freelancer. I wouldn't like to say I'm completely easy breezy, because particularly now with Corona, you know, that's the prime example of it's quite very wobbly actually, but it does get easier. And I think if you are naturally a proactive freelancer, then you'll know that your contract is coming to an end, and you will actively seek to send your CV out a month ahead. I think it's always been, be organized. I think that's the main thing. Be organized and just set up meetings with people when it's coming to the end of your contract. It's your bosses know that you're a freelancer, and if you have to go for an interview, then they'll understand. I think that's something that I only really accepted recently as well. I was always sort of trying to hide the fact that I was talking to another company and I felt ashamed or embarrassed, I felt guilty. But you know, it's a freelancer world, and you have to put yourself first. I think that's the main thing. You have to, you know, I pay a mortgage, and that's, you know, a wake up call for me. Like, I can't really go without not having work, so I'm always super proactive. But it does get easier, and over the past 3 years, people have been contacting me to work with them, so it does get a lot easier. So and I think that's true of most people that I know. So it's definitely getting easier as the more higher up you get.